Have you ever wondered to yourself how Eevee became the 3 legendary dog Pokemon, Entei, Suicune, and Raikou? Well, this is something that came over my mind just the other day, and I vividly remember hearing this amongst my friends as a kid. Now, I didn't remember the exact details of this as my memories are a little vague, so the most obvious thing to do was dive in and collect as much Pokemon information as I can to come up with the answer that I needed here. Now, I already have all the information from the Pokemon manga, and I'm currently rewatching the Pokemon anime. I'm currently on season 5, I'm making my way up, and I just recently played Pokemon Soul Silver and Fire Red. And last but not least, obviously I used the internet. I dove right in and found as much information as I possibly could on this, and the internet actually helped the most. Now, the first question I actually needed to ask myself was, who exactly is Eevee and what kind of Pokemon is it? Now, as we know, Eevee is this cute little doggy that we have seen in the Pokemon anime and game and franchise on a whole many times over. And Eevee has something unique that only Eevee can do compared to every other Pokemon. Eevee has the power to evolve in various types of elemental Pokemon, and these are called Eeveelutions. Now, in order for Eevee to evolve into any one of these various forms, Eevee must meet specific evolutionary requirements such as having specific elemental stones or high friendship levels. And some of Eevee's evolutions require a certain time of day, which in turn also makes Eevee a very tricky Pokemon to have, since if, for example, you're trying to get one specific type, if you somehow end up in the wrong conditions, you're going to end up with a totally different evolution. For example, if you want to get yourself a Jolteon, all you need to do is get a Thunderstone. Place it next to Eevee and she will immediately evolve into the spiky-legged thunder dog we know as Jolteon. Now, the same is also said if you get yourself a Firestone or Waterstone, which will give you Flareon and Vaporeon respectively. But Eevee doesn't just evolve with stones, Eevee can also evolve into the greatest form ever, Umbreon. By just getting the highest level of friendship with Eevee during the night and leveling it up, then it will turn into this amazing skin that is Umbreon. Now, on a little side note here, whenever you type in Vaporeon on Google, you get some really disturbing things that you never needed to know. I'm not going to touch directly on this, but this human-fish hybrid thing and what Vaporeon's real purpose is a little bit too much for you Pokemon fans out there, and you know who I'm talking about. But let's get back on topic. So after this, I went on to the second question, which is how is Eevee related to the 3 legendary dogs? Which is pretty obvious. The 3 legendary dogs represent the elements fire, water, and lightning, which are represented by Entei, Suicune, and Raikou. And as we know, Eevee has the possibility to evolve into almost any elemental Pokemon, and Eevee can evolve into the same forms as Flareon, which represents fire, Jolteon, thunder, and Vaporeon, water. So that right there is the first initial connection between the two sets. Another thing we know with Eevee is that when Eevee evolves, that's it. There is no secondary evolution after that or a devolve process. Now, I know I said devolve because in Pokemon they don't really do that, that's a Digimon thing. However, Slowpoke actually has the ability to evolve and devolve just by losing the Shelter, but that's a little off topic, so we're gonna get back in here. Now, with this information about Eevee, another question cropped up. How exactly did these 3 Eeveelutions evolve another time? To further evolve them, what we needed to do was dive into the Pokemon lore itself. Now, this lore we're gonna cover here comes from one specific Pokemon city called Ecruteak City, located in the Johto region, which in my personal opinion is the best region in all of Pokemon history. But the story we're talking about is the story of the Brass Tower. Now, this is the tower that is said to give birth to the Pokemon Raikou, Entei, and Suicune. According to the legend, one fateful night, the Brass Tower was struck by a massive force of lightning, which led to a massive fire that engulfed the entire tower. 3 Pokemon were believed to be trapped inside this tower, and these 3 Pokemon were Eeveelutions, Flareon, Vaporeon, and Jolteon. Due to the immense power of the flames, each of them perished, even the fiery Pokemon Flareon. However, in a miraculous moment after, a rainbow began to form above the tower. This rainbow signified the coming of the legendary and miraculous Pokemon Ho-Oh. Ho-Oh took this opportunity to descend from the skies, shining light all around the area. As Ho-Oh reached the bodies of these 3 Eeveelutions, it felt such sadness and decided to resurrect these 3 Pokemon, not only giving them a second chance at life, but granting them extraordinary and legendary powers to give them a new purpose onwards. And in that moment, the 3 legendary beasts were born. Flareon took on a fiery power and turned into this mighty, ferocious lion that is Entei. Vaporeon, the half-human, half-Pokemon hybrid, turned into the majestic spirit animal that is Suicune. And then finally Jolteon, with a massive mighty roar, turns into the magnificent Raikou. Now, this is one of the biggest lore pieces we do find in the Johto region, and I will be very honest with you, Johto is one of my favorite seasons in the anime. I will forever love it. It also has one of the best songs, I'm telling you guys. The Johto song is just straight fire. Now, as we cover that lore, we do realize that it was all due to Ho-Oh that those Eeveelutions were able to turn into the 3 legendary beasts. Ho-Oh is one of those creatures we see in the Pokemon franchise very rarely, and it was actually really cool that we were able to see Ho-Oh at the end of the first episode of Pokemon. Ho-Oh is also the only Phoenix Pokemon in existence. And with Ho-Oh itself, one of my favorite Pokédex entries comes from Pokemon Silver. Its feathers are in 7 colors. It is said that anyone seeing it is promised eternal happiness. And due to Ash seeing it in the first episode is probably why Ash remains small, a little child forever, 10-year-old, and always happy on his journeys. Now, as we get back on topic, we know the answer to how Eevee became the 3 legendary beasts. However, a new question crops up with this story. Why exactly did Ho-Oh resurrect the 3 Eeveelutions in particular? Now, the answer for this can be found in what exactly these 3 beasts represent. And this representation came forth because there seemed to be an imbalance in the Pokemon world at the time, which caused the need for these 3 legendary beasts of these elements to take rise, in order to bring back balance to an unstable and chaotic world, or region in particular, since this does take place in the Johto region. The first one we're going to start off here is with my personal favorite, Suicune. Suicune is the representation of rain that quenches the flames of the brass tower. Unlike Raikou and Entei, Suicune's element was not directly involved in the disaster, but is said to have appeared in response to the resurrection as it followed the legendary beasts, which means when they were resurrected, the rain started to fall to quench the fire from the tower. Now, we also know from various Pokédex entries, as well as watching the anime and just the manga in whole, when Suicune appears, it is a magnificent and miraculous sign for the person seeing Suicune. It is a sign of luck. We also know that Suicune has one of the greatest powers in anime history. When Suicune goes on a lake, it instantly purifies it. I think that is so cool, and that is one of the reasons that I actually really like Suicune, because think about it, whenever a lake is polluted or what, all Suicune has to do is literally touch the lake and this energy aura will come over it, cleansing it into clean, fresh water. We also know Suicune is the perfect forest guardian, as we see in the movie with Celebi. Now, the second one we're going to cover here is Raikou. Raikou embodies the power of thunder and electricity, representing the lightning that struck the brass tower during the tragic event, which is probably why Raikou is the most aggressive out of the 3. And this actually makes a lot of sense when you think about one of the Pokédex entries that states every time a Raikou is born, a massive thundercloud is sighting, shooting lightning from the sky. Now, one of the biggest events where we get to see Raikou in the Pokemon anime is in Pokemon Chronicles: The Legend of Thunder. Those episodes were, in my opinion, one of the best Pokemon episodes I have ever seen, and that is to this day. Sadly, we don't get stuff like that in the mainstream Pokemon franchise. However, let me tell you, if you haven't watched that, you need to. Raikou in that was so awesome. It's what made me fall in love with this Pokemon and realize how awesome he was on a whole. Now, lastly, we're going to cover Entei. And Entei himself is associated with the fire that consumed the brass tower. Maybe it was this fire that was so big and so engulfing of this tower that allowed Ho-Oh to see there was a desperate need for his help here. Now, as we know, fire is extremely destructive and powerful, and that's why some of the Pokédex entries for Entei are just crazy. It says that every time he barks, volcano simply erupts. Could you imagine that? Or a new volcano forms every time one of these creatures are born. Now, one of the things that was really cool about Entei that made me love him as a kid was the Pokemon movie. I think it was the 3rd movie where we get to see Entei. Somehow that little girl's dad transformed into Entei due to the unknown, and it was a crazy experience. I remember seeing Entei for the first time in that movie, and I was just blown away at how cool he was. However, when I first met Suicune, that's when it all changed, and I realized he was my favorite legendary dog. Now, one last thing I wanted to touch on with this video, because it's something I still have no answer for, and if you do, I would love the answer to it in the comment section below. How exactly did Flareon die in this massive fire tower? Isn't Flareon literally made of flames, or is it just red due to the evolutions? That's just something I don't know, but it's a question I've always had.